Three, two, one. Hello, this is Theory of Obscurity. I am Chriddof.
And he's Walt.
This is a podcast in which we basically send little bits of obscure media to each other, where there can be anything from, in the past episodes we've had annuals, books, little bits of movies, albums, just all sorts. And once again, I've sent Matthew two separate things that are connected, and he sent me a short film. So I sent you DAICON III and DAICON IV Opening Animation. So
yeah.
Do you want to tell us about your initial
yeah, this was something I wasn't overly familiar, but I wasn't familiar with it at all. But it turns out they've got their own Wikipedia entry. These little two short animes, 5 minutes each, and they've got their own Wikipedia entry because it turns out they were made by some very important people.
Yes.
The guys who went on to form Gainax.
Yeah.
Now, anime's not really my wheelhouse. I've often had a bit of trouble getting into Japanese things, and I blame Haim Saban specifically.
Yeah.
And his policy of repackaging any old Japanese animation he could find and throwing it at children in the late 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
I think the likes of Little Bits and the 1970 blue-haired Pinocchio, I think those put me off anime for life, really.
Yeah. My sister seems to remember that blue-haired Pinocchio, and though she is really into anime, she does recall that as sort of being horrible in some way. I never really watched it. But, yeah.
It was very bleak.
Yeah.
And unsettling. Over and above the bleak and unsettling nature of redubbed Japanese animation, which always seems vaguely alien anyway, because the two bits don't fit. They've tried to make it Western. They've given it a Western soundtrack, but it's, with all the best will in the world, it's still Japanese.
Yes, they had this thing of really trying to relentlessly over-Westernize these animations.
Yeah.
Up until I think Pokemon, where they did things like change. The people would have like rice balls as snacks, and they changed them into like donuts and burgers. They actually reanimated bits of the screen, and
they took away all the seizure bits. What's the point of Pokemon without the seizures?
Yeah.
So anyway, DAICON III IV is, it turns out, a name for the biggest science fiction convention in Japan.
Yeah,
which has a different name depending on where they host it. And when they host it in, is it Osaka?
I think it would be, yeah.
I think it's Osaka, they call it DAICON, because that makes sense.
DAICON is named, it's like a pun on a type of radish they have.
Yeah, it's a sort of white radishy parsnippy thing, which presumably is native to Osaka. And that shows up in the animation. The first one, for DAICON 3, it's the one with most of a plot.
Yes.
For what it's worth, for what I could figure out. Because both of them are just massive in-jokes. Just massive, colossal, all-encompassing in-jokes about things that I largely didn't recognise. They star this little... Well, in the third one, she's a little red-headed girl. I called her Dot.
Right.
Because she looks like Dot, the adorable Australian cherub. And the plot to the DAICON 3 intro, as near as I could make out, was that she has to deliver a glass of water. She's tasked with delivering a glass of water to DAICON by some disturbing characters who I understand are called the Science Patrol and are from Ultraman. One of them's just got the white blank eyes and a constantly open bean mouth. He's in the constant anime excited expression.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure if I knew anything about Ultraman, I might know why that is.
Yeah. I have some familiarity with Ultraman and sort of that kind of specifically Japanese kind of superhero in general, because when I was very, very young, in my local video store, which was actually part of a like a general grocery store called Sperrings. They had like a video store tacked onto that, And one of the things they had there was a UK VHS release of 2 episodes of a thing called Spectra Man, which was like a separate franchise, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before, basically, and I was just sort of hooked by this bizarre sort of live action thing with people, and of course, several years later, Channel 4 started showing Godzilla movies late night at Friday nights.
Godzilla shows up in these as well. She's got to deliver this glass of water, and there's a mecha that suddenly shows up to prevent her for whatever reason, and I can't go through this particularly because I don't know what half of these things are.
Yeah.
Or what's going on.
Yeah.
She just has a fight with everything in the universe.
yes.
Basically, with her glass of water. Some of the things I recognise. I recognised TIE fighters and that from Star Wars. And the tripods from the War of the Worlds. Yeah. And obviously when the kaiju show up, I recognise most of those. Godzilla and the turtle named Gamera.
Yes.
And I think Hedorah showed up as well. And it's just this massive, massive fight. It's like, to the uninitiated like me, it's like the ultimate battle of Ultimate Destiny without the song over the top explaining what's going on. The ultimate showdown of Ultimate Destiny, I mean.
Yes, yeah. That was what was it? That Neil Cicierega who did it?
Cicierega, I think.
Yeah.
Lemon Demon, anyway. Lemon Demon.
Yes.
It's like that, only I don't know what half of this stuff is. And then eventually they just literally blow up the world. And at one point, the USS Enterprise shows up just to explode for no reason at all, which I quite appreciated. Not that I hate Star Trek, I just that they threw that in for no reason. Everything explodes, and there's just a devastated wasteland, and she eventually finds one of those DAICON things, one of them radishes, and she pours the water, and it grows into a spaceship, which she becomes the captain of this spaceship, and it flies away.
Yes.
And apparently the 2 weird-looking men with her are 2 of the 3 producers.
Yes.
Toshio Okada and Yoshihiro Takeda. The other one being the legendary Hideaki Anno, who I had heard of.
Yes.
Because he's mental.
Yes. Because if I go to... Hang on a second, let me click on the tabs here. Usually I make notes for this, but I'm having to... because everything's been so hectic at my local place, I've got relying on tabs this episode. So just so you know, so just people know that when we're clicking things, that's us. So
don't judge.
But it's
bastards.
But yes, there's somebody, one of the people who made it described it. Let me try and find the quote. Where is the quote? At Fanny May Con, Yamaga said, "The openings are a source of pride and something you want to strangle." Akai, and it says, Akai, who wants to produce better films, stated, which is a bit of an odd sentence. I should say I'm reading this off of animangafandom.com, which is a general sort of wiki about anime, and it's a bit oddly written as a result. But it says
it might be translated from
it says, "I don't want to see them for a long time. Just thinking about them sends shivers down my spine," which is a bit unfair, really, because it was quite an achievement, and it did start off the thing. But I understand why he says that, because there's lots of, as somebody who I guess is technically a YouTube creator in some way, I have done stuff in the past that I think is just rubbish now, but people still generally like and appreciate, and I can accept that.
Yeah, and I can understand why you might have an aversion to looking at it, because it was literally just made by those 3 people.
Yeah.
The first one, the DAICON III animation, was literally just made by Okada, Takeda, and Anno, and it's amazing. It's as good as any anime I've ever seen, and better than quite a lot.
Yeah.
and which means it must have been a bloody nightmare for the three of them to put together.
Yes, it says here actually that they had to release like a sort of unofficial VHS of each one after they made them, just to recoup some of the costs they spent on the
yeah. So the convention came to Osaka again a couple of years later. When are these from? 1981 and 1983. So yeah, 1983 was DAICON 4, and I don't know why I just held up four fingers. And obviously they had to follow it up, and this time they had a bit more of a team. And I think the fourth one's a little bit shorter if you don't count the first minute and a half, which is just a reprise of the original.
Yeah, I noticed there's some reanimated shots. They've slightly changed and added some things, but it is some repeated footage. Yeah,
but and after that it starts playing the Electric Light Orchestra.
Yes,
because it wasn't random enough as it is. The song Twilight from the album Time, if any ELO fans happen to be listening.
Yeah,
which somebody's got to be listening.
Yeah. I'll just jump in here. I'll say that I did notice very recently of a late 70s band called Tulip in Japan, who basically completely nailed exactly that ELO sound. They've got this. I downloaded this song of theirs called "Welcome to My House," which is. It starts off like Mr. Blue Sky, and then it has all the exact same kind of harmony singing and everything. It's on YouTube actually to stream, and it's actually quite extraordinary, because I guess we kind of forget that Western artists are often very popular in Japan. We kind of think of it as like this whole separate thing, and while they do obviously have their own artists, there is a very strong Western influence, of course, that has been ever since after the war, of course.
And I suppose there is something about ELO that I can see appealing to the Japanese, to Japan, that they're big and ambitious and not content to be like anybody else. Anyway, this is Twilight from Time, which was roughly contemporary with the animation, so it's synthesizer era yellow.
Yeah,
but it's still quite pleasant. And we meet Dot again. Now she's an adult.
Yeah,
and she's dressed as a Playboy bunny for no reason at all.
Yes, which later caused problems with an attempt to officially release the animations in America, because it says here on that same wiki, the rights to use of the Playboy bunny costume was denied, and the rights to Electric Light Orchestra's music was consequently not sought. So, yeah.
Jeff Lynne probably would have been okay with it.
Yeah.
Hugh Hefner wasn't, but Jeff Lynne probably would have been if they'd asked.
Yeah.
But there it is. And just then, basically, it's just another massive fight, only with the girl as an adult this time. She fights off Darth Vader with a lightsaber. She beats up an alien. I refuse to call them xenomorphs because that means the same thing.
Yeah.
She beats all kinds of mechas I would have recognised if I'd been a Japanese attendee of the actual con.
The main one that attempts to crush her underneath, and then she just sort of just shoves it yeah. That is, I believe that's one of the main robots from a mecha, rather, from a very long-running franchise called Gundam, which has had loads of different series. I think it's still running technically now.
Oh yeah, I've heard of Gundam.
Yeah.
I don't know anything else about it, but it's got mechas and it's called Gundam. That's the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's like an anime equivalent of a long-running multi sort of franchise kind of thing, like Star Trek, where you have different series of that. It's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, some kind of massively important sword that I should recognise as well comes into play and clones itself and spins around. And there's some Klingons and some hobbits and Conan.
At one point you see just all the DC universe at once, or just scrolled by. Yes.
Yeah, the entire Justice League and the Teen Titans.
Yes.
All just background wallpaper. Dragon Riders of Pern at one point. Even Jerry Anderson gets a look in.
Yes, yes.
A couple of Thunderbirds show up.
Yes.
And it's just colour and sound and action and motion until the Earth blows up again. And then again. And then I think the Earth blows up. I think the Earth blows up a few times in a row.
Well, it seems that initially it blows up and then it's reversed and then it sort of freezes over and then loads of trees grow or something.
Let me see how they put it on the on Wikipedia. Successive upheavals of the Earth give birth to new worlds.
That sort of sounds. It sort of sounds like what happened in Star Trek II, the Wrath of Khan, with the whole thing about
Genesis.
And like terraforming and all that. It seems like that might have been a reference at that point. Yeah.
It might have been. It might have been, but with a lot less coherence.
Yes.
There's no great attempt at making any massive kind of sense, which is something I'm not surprised about because I'm familiar with Hideaki Anno and I know that this is his method of completing a story.
Yes.
It all gets a bit end of Evangelion. There isn't a big red ocean and a broken half-faced statue or anything, and then it just sort of stops, doesn't it? We go back to the parsnip ship and it all...
There's like a huge wave of just IP, basically. Just countless people who can't even focus on anything. I think I spotted, some people here and there.
Yeah, just a tidal wave of intellectual property.
Yes, exactly, yeah. One thing I'll add, actually, is Osamu Tezuka, who's quite a famous, if you don't know, if anybody listening to this podcast doesn't know, he's like the main guy for both Japanese manga and anime. He basically kick-started manga in general and also had a hand to play in the early development of anime. And I'll just read out this... little bit from the wiki page I've got up here because it does tie into the way you're struggling to sort of sum all this up. Osamu Tezuka did not see the opening film at DAICON III but was shown the film by Akai and Yamaga later that night. After watching the film, Tezuka remarked, "Well, there certainly were a lot of characters in the film. There were also some that weren't in the film." I mean, that kind of...
That sums it all up, doesn't it?
Yes. Okay, sorry for the interruption, but this is Future Chriddof here. It turns out I missed an important bit of information out from that wiki page as regards to Tezuka's remarks. It seems that he was actually subtly commenting on them having accidentally left out all of his characters in DAICON III. So there were no appearances in that film from Astro Boy, no Blackjack, no Kimber the White Lion, and so on. Although I do feel it works still as a description of the sheer bombastic overload of both films, particularly DAICON IV. Okay, back to the past. And there's apparently there's themes that are mentioned, like apparently the theme of water in the opening represented opportunity in DAICON III, apparently. I just read that.
Right.
And making best use of one's...
Definitely noticed that.
Yeah. Making the best use of one's opportunities while fighting against those who would seek to steal such opportunity away. So that's why there's a fight, I guess. So, yeah. And then DAICON IV, because of course they had a team, as we've mentioned. It was owned by a textile union, apparently, the building, and Takeda. I do apologise for mispronouncing these things. I am actually hoping to learn Japanese at a future point. But he defined it as a literal anime sweatshop. The building was shut down at 9 p.m. Every night, and a majority of the staff would be locked inside and working through the night without air conditioning. And the crew consisted of 12 people. I think one of the crew just did all the effects, as in stuff blowing up, and that was just his deal. And it says also it was meant to be 15 minutes long, but it was such a difficult production, as you can imagine, they had to like cut it all down to what you see there.
That could either explain why it's so overstuffed and complicated, or more likely wouldn't have made any difference if it had been 15 minutes long. It would have been just the exact same but longer.
Yes. Yeah. So as I said earlier, they had to pay off the debts from. They released videos of it. They also sold because they shot it on 8mm film. Like I think it must have been something like Super 8 or something. They sold off some of the reels of the film they used to make it. They wanted to film it on 60mm, but that was too expensive, of course. And they did that thing where you sell cells, the cell animation painted things, And they used the profit from DAICON III directly to produce DAICON IV. So it's there was a Laserdisc apparently put out, but it was an unofficial Laserdisc apparently because of all the
everything's better on Laserdisc.
And it says Laserdisc is considered rare and highly valuable among collectors, easily fetching prices of over $1,000 on online auctions. So there you go.
Yeah, so these animations led directly to the formation of Gainax. And Gainax I have heard of.
Yes.
Because they're seminal. And they're famous for not necessarily for maybe making less sense as the closer you are to the end. The fact these animations led to Gainax means they're obviously some of the most important pieces of work in recent anime history by default.
Yeah. There's a bit one of these pages I've seen which credits it as the technically being, because it was released sort of on video just to recoup costs, technically makes it the first OAV or original animation video, which is basically there was a direct-to-video market that basically developed in the 80s for a lot of anime productions. A lot of the odder things basically were created and solely to be released straight to video.
Yeah, I suppose it was the first over. Yeah,
it apparently predates another thing, which was usually said to be the first one. I think it's named after Dallas. It's after the TV show, but it has nothing to do with Dallas. But I think it was actually named after. It's like Dallas or Dallas or something. I can't quite remember, but yeah. So, I think I can tell that you were just sort of completely sort of you couldn't quite comprehend it. You couldn't really comprehend any of it, really.
I was lost as far as meaning was concerned.
Yeah.
But technically, as a spectacle, it is amazing.
Yes, yeah. And
I don't know what it is, but it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who is an anime fan, I'm more interested in 80s and 90s anime than the more recent stuff they do, which seems to be catered entirely to perverts or something. But it's just, it gets by on sheer spectacle alone. I mean, the combination of what is quite unusual to Western audience, an ELO track in the fourth one, and just everything else, and like, oh god, there's like a space battle cruiser Yamato smashing into the USS Enterprise, which is one of those things that smashes up the Enterprise, because there's all these odd little things, and you see like Batman and Robin just scroll past like for us half a second, and then the alien from the Aliens films, not xenomorphs, of course, as we've stated, and.
Well, it's not like it was supposed to tell a story or anything.
No,
it's not like it's not like a film. It's not like he didn't have any great obligation to be coherent in the first place. It's a celebratory animation to open a convention.
Yeah, it's
what it's meant to be. It's a skit. It's a massive in-joke crashing into several other in-jokes in an extremely spectacular fashion, and that's what it's meant to be, and it's very good at that.
Yes, it's an animated opening. What's the name they use for the Olympic thing? Opening ceremony. Yeah.
Ceremony.
Yeah. it's basically an animated opening ceremony, and with that entails there's all sorts of peculiar things which you might not understand in, that's solely to do with the country you're based in. Like with the closing British ceremony back in 2012, there was they just had some people dressed as Del Boy and Rodney dressed as Batman and Robin with, the yellow Robin Reliant, and most people outside were kind of...
That is going to confuse people.
Yeah, most people.
I remember thinking that.
Yeah, the only people who weren't confused were some Eastern European countries where that show was actually shown and very popular. But for most of the world, it was oh, there's Batman and Robin, and they're walking in front of some old car. It's just completely baffling.
Batman's short and fat.
Yes. Yeah.
I like that, though. I like using a massive platform like that just to confuse people. I think people should do it more often.
Yeah. It doesn't happen nearly enough now these days. That everything's so rigidly and on script and on. Yeah. One thing I will say is that I really love the DAICON IV just because it's just so concentrated and just bam 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 bam, all these things backed with an ELO track, and it's just sort of mind bending almost. DAICON 3 is interesting. It's very it's like a sort of a run up to DAICON 4.
I kind of prefer structure, so I kind of prefer DAICON 3 myself, because it's actually, it almost has a beginning, middle and an end. Whereas DAICON 4 is just, I find it easier to remember that way. I don't remember DAICON 4 in so much detail because it all sort of blurred into one.
Yes.
I'm sure that's partly because I didn't recognise half the references.
Yeah.
And obviously the audience it's made for would have done. That's the important thing.
Yeah. So to wrap this section up, really, would you recommend? I would definitely recommend watching both of them, DAICON 3 and 4, in order as well, so you get this sort of ramping up. Obviously, it's not one for people who are just turned off by anything just relentlessly confusing, or if you don't know, the in-jokiness of it all.
Yeah, I've got nothing against exercises in pure style. I just didn't get the references, so it was lost on me.
Yeah,
that's my problem.
Yeah,
obviously. Yeah, I'd recommend. I mean, anyone interested in anime probably should see it just by rote because it's so important. And anyone interested in Japanese culture, and anyone interested in, and possibly even anyone interested in science fiction and cult, whatever you're supposed to call it these days. It's not going to be for everyone because it's very loud and very fast and ultimately meaningless. But for what it is, it's hard to imagine it being improved on.
Yeah, exactly. So that was DAICON 3 and DAICON 4 opening animations. And now we're going to go on to what Matthew has sent over to me. It's a film called The Last Laugh, a short film. The Last Laugh is a... So I really, really loved this short. It's a 20-minute short. It's by Paul Hendy, who is somebody known for something else you mentioned. I forget.
It's written and directed by Paul Hendy, who used to present the Disney Club and various other children's and light entertainment programs. I think he had a stint on Wheel of Fortune for about 5 minutes. He's a sort of... He looks like a sort of Muppet Baby Les Dennis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I sort of... The Disney Club was on GMTV or something, wasn't it? Yeah. And, this is... So, having... Obviously, because he's got a background in doing sort of light entertainment-y kind of things throughout the 90s.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can see this is the kind of film he would make, but it's really not nice because it's just the performances and coupled with the slightly eerie plot. I don't want to try and give too much away, even through when I'm describing it. The moment you only about 2 or 3 minutes in, you will probably guess what's going to happen, but that doesn't really spoil things. But it's
not exactly plot driven.
No, it's just a nice sort of situation. It's generally very, very touching. and sad and melancholy and all this. And it's basically you have three. I'm just reading off the IMDb here. Three legendary British comedians, Tommy Cooper, Eric Morecambe and Bob Monkhouse, sitting in a dressing room discussing the secret of comedy and what it means to be funny. So basically, it starts off with Tommy Cooper, who is played by Damien Williams, who portrayed him, I believe, in a onstage one-man play or something.
Yeah, there's been a couple of plays about Tommy Cooper.
Yeah.
Clive Mantle and Jerome Flynn also played him in the same one, I think. Just Like That it was called.
Yes.
Inevitably.
Yes. Just the same as like anything to do with Kenny Everett gets called All in the Best Possible Taste or something. But so it starts with him, and you can tell right off that it's meant to be happening on the fateful night that he basically sort of horrifyingly sort of dies on front of on camera during a live broadcast, and everybody. The famed thing is that he died, and like everybody didn't realize he had died, and they were applauding.
They thought it was a bit.
Yeah, exactly. They thought it was a bit, and then you pull the curtains, and there's been a while ago there was like a documentary, sort of
quickly went to commercials.
Yeah. I've never really seen that clip, and I kind of avoided it.
I have.
Yeah.
I have. I wish I hadn't.
Yeah.
I have. I didn't seek it out.
Yeah. It's, from what I hear, it's just sort of it's just so sad and grim and sort of chilling. Yeah. And but this is interesting because it takes that sad ending and sort of turns it into some sort of kind of weird sort of spectral kind of ghost story. It feels like Tales of the Unexpected or any sort of like any 70s 80s kind of thing, with sort of fate controlling characters, but not in a sinister way. There's nothing sinister about it. It's just this sort of, it's just it's presented as a kind of final chapter, and it's never properly explained why these three famous people have been sort of brought together in this kind of holding pen, sort of in between life and death, or whatever it is.
Yeah. It's a life on Mars, ashes to ashes sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so there's at the beginning he's got like there's a copy of the Daily Mirror you don't get to properly see, and which comes up later on, and he's sort of clutching at his chest. He swigs down some pills, and then in comes Bob Monkhouse, I think, is the first person to arrive, and then and it says, "Oh, hello," and they're both chatting away, and I really like the they just really, all three people in this film, they really felt like the people they're portraying, even through facially they might seem slightly off on occasion. They just have the mannerisms and they have the voices down. Yeah.
Damien Williams technically looks a little more like Les Dawson than Tommy Cooper, but you don't realise it while he's playing because he embodies Tommy Cooper.
Yeah, exactly. There's just a little bit of like prosthetic makeup on his nose, but that's it's just it doesn't really. It's just a little extra thing that just helps sell it, really. Yeah.
Simon Cartwright's voice as Bob Monkhouse is spot on as well.
Yes.
That was actually, I was genuinely very impressed with that one.
Yeah, it gives the impression. Yeah, I mean, it is pretty much just Bob Monkhouse's voice basically, but coming out of somebody else. So they're sort of giving sort of repartee, sort of trading sort of mild insults to each other. Then in comes Eric Morecambe, and they talking. It continues from there. They're sort of, and then the mood sort of slightly shifts over a while, and it starts to shift when I think it's Bob Monkhouse delivers his new joke, and Eric Morecambe goes, "Oh, your new joke! You've got another joke," and all that. And the joke is related to having sex at the age of 56 or 54, whatever it is. The actual joke itself isn't really important because it's used as a way to sort of move into the sort of more introspective thing when they're sort of discussing how they would tell the joke. There's like Eric Morecambe says, well, I couldn't really say having sex, we'd have to like allude to it, and then he tries it out like that, and then he says, but no, the way you do it is better, and all this business. And then there's a bit where Tommy Cooper relates the famous example that happened like in the 70s or whenever it was, when he was just crying out in the streets outside some studios, and everybody thought he was just being daft or something, and he's sort of haunted by that thing.
Obviously foreshadowing the manner of his death.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't want to completely spoil the ending of the film, so I'll just sort of end on that copy of the Daily Mirror basically gives the game away, and it's handled really well, their reactions, and they're kind of a bit scared, startled, they sort of accept it as a sort of strange sort of spooky sort of thing. It's melancholy and sad and horrible and beautiful at the same time. It's just I generally was really taken away with this film, really. It just, yeah.
Paul Hendy was last seen on television, I believe, in Stash, which showed up, a 5-minute sort of quasi game show that showed up in daytimes or in night times whenever there was 5 minutes to film, where he would basically stand in the middle of a shopping mall and bother people with questions and hand over banknotes when they got them right.
Yes.
And just pull that out for 5 minutes. And it's if it's remembered at all, it's one of the worst programs ITV ever made. But I always quite enjoyed it because it was so blatantly just filling time.
Yes.
And it wasn't pretending otherwise. I don't think he's been seen on television since then. He wrote some novels about being one was called Diary of a C-list celeb. So he wrote some novels about being a low-profile showbiz person, and now he produces pantomimes, and when he's got the cash, he makes short films like this one.
And it was really generally really good. It's sort of, I actually watched it at a point, it was very early in the morning, and I was feeling quite depressed, and it sort of actually lifted me out of that depression just for a little bit. It's just sort of something, it's kind of weird to giving the events it's mentioning, but it just worked somehow brilliantly. Yeah. Because when going back to things like these famous deaths, like of course Tommy Cooper, they're always presented in such sort of lurid, garish detail, with when they're like, not even when like YouTube, some random YouTube like Watch Mojo or something might be covering it, but like even when it's something like along the lines of actual documentary of something, it just goes unpleasant, and this feels like a kind of corrective in that sense.
Yeah. Eric Morecambe, of course, also died not literally on stage, but immediately after coming off stage. That's the connection. Bob Monkhouse didn't. He died peacefully of prostate cancer, and he mentions in the film about how he's not thought of as a comedian. He's thought of as a game show host.
Yes, he's saying
as an odd one out.
He says at one point during that exchange that it says, well, they'll be doing impressions of you 20 years from now, but me, they won't remember me, and stuff like that. Yeah.
My reading, and this could be complete bollocks, but my reading is that Monkhouse is a sort of psychopomp for Eric and Tommy, because he's the one that first notices that all the photographs are of dead comedians.
Yes.
And he's the one that points out that they both think they're in different places.
Yeah.
I think he's the Reaper figure in this scenario. The what's his name? Sharon. And that might just be me reading stuff into it. It might be complete bollocks that Paul Hendy never thought of, but it's good. It's nice that it provokes that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah. It's just amazing that somebody from that kind of very ITV kind of background can make a film that is sort of subtly strange and melancholy and everything. Well, the last appearance on television was that aforementioned thing, with the what was it called? Stash. Yes, and it's interesting because there are quite often you see these people and you think they're just so naff and cheesy, but some of these people do have, they have genuine hidden depths, genuine artistic depths. And another person that actually reminds me, that I've just thought of, is that woman off of Copycats, Jessica
Martin.
Jessica Martin, yeah, because she's a cartoonist now.
She is.
Yes,
she is. I've read a comic she drew. About the character she played in Doctor Who back in 1988.
Yes, and she's done a graphic novel about something about the 1920s and things, and she was briefly covered in the Comics Journal, which is the thing, by Fantagraphics, publisher of Robert Crumb and all that, So it's just extraordinary thinking, really. Yes. But it's, the hidden depths and everything that we do write people off sometimes as just being these things. But have we covered everything out? Okay, or was there? Can you think of anything else?
I haven't praised Bob Golding as Eric Morecambe. I mentioned the other two. I should mention him as well, so he's not left out.
Yes. Bob Golding in particular, because even though he looks slightly too young, he just looks. He's just kind of perfect, really. He just again, like Damien Williams, he embodies Eric Morecambe. He just got mannerisms, the voice, just everything. It's just and I imagine he would age into that role a bit, as time goes on.
If you look away, you could forget, to be perfectly honest, that you're listening to lookalikes and soundalikes.
Yeah. It's just incredibly well done, and I like it. That sort of, it's a very common kind of basic sort of scenario that's been done, a lot in the Twilight Zone and things like that. But it's even though roughly what's going to happen, just the way it's done and executed on screen is just enjoyable in and of itself. And it's I definitely recommend this. Absolutely, it's only about 20 minutes long, and it's on Vimeo, I think, isn't it?
It can be found on Vimeo, vimeo.com/210409977, because that's how Vimeo works.
But so of course I will put the links to all three of these videos, of course, and so to wrap up, that was episode 4, was it? Is it episode 4?
It was episode 4.
It is episode 4, of Theory of Obscurity, and this will be up on my SoundCloud, Chriddof's SoundCloud, and the Applemask YouTube channel and everything like that. And I'll include links and whatnot, and hopefully we'll see you again in about 2 weeks' time for another and you know what to expect in 2 weeks' time. We'll be discussing 2 other things you've not heard of, basically. Yes. So I have been Chriddof.
And I have been Applemask.
And that is it for episode 4 of Theory of Obscurity. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Goodbye. I sound odd on that first bye. Sorry.